So I'm digging through the New Testament, and I came across a mystery in the New Testament that most Christians have never really stopped to think about. It's found in Second Thessalonians chapter 2. Paul is writing about the rise of the man of lawlessness, a future figure many Christians associate with the Antichrist, right? But this gets overlooked. You see, Paul says this figure will one day deceive many people, oppose God, exalt himself, and become part of a final rebellion before the return of Jesus Christ. But Paul also says something very strange. When I was reading this, I read that he says the man of lawlessness cannot be revealed yet because something is restraining him. Something is holding him back. And I thought that was really interesting. Something is stopping this final evil from stepping fully onto the world stage. Okay. But then Paul tells the Thessalonians something that set me back in my seat. He says, "You know what is restraining him." And that's the mystery because Paul says they know, but he never tells us. He does not name the restrainer, and I'm like, mystery, I've got to figure this out. He does not clearly identify whether it's a government, an angel, the church, the Holy Spirit, or something else. But think about this. For nearly 2,000 years, Christians have been asking the same questions. Theologians, biblical scholars, who or what is the restrainer? And that's what we're going to solve today. Because the answer matters. This is not just a prophecy puzzle. The mystery points to one of the most comforting truths in the entire Bible, in my opinion. Evil is real, but evil is not in control. Now, I want you to understand the fear behind this letter and why Paul wrote it in the first place. The Thessalonian Christians were shaken. They had heard claims that the day of the Lord had already come. They were worried that the final events had started and they had somehow missed what God was doing. So Paul writes this letter to calm them down. He tells them, no, the final rebellion has not happened yet. The man of lawlessness has not been revealed yet. So in other words, what Paul is saying here, he's not trying to make them curious. He's trying to make them steady. That's important. The point of this passage is not panic. The point is confidence. Notice what Paul actually says. Paul says the lawlessness is already at work. That means evil was already moving in his day. Deception already spreading. Rebellion against God was already growing. Darkness was already pushing. But it was not fully released. It was restrained. Now that means evil has limits. The man of lawlessness does not get to appear whenever he wants. Darkness does not control the schedule. The devil does not own a calendar. Something is holding him back until the proper time. Now, I want you to look at the main suspects here. As I was going through this, I thought Rome. Because in Paul's world, Rome was brutal, proud, and often hostile to Christians. But Rome also brought order. Rome had laws, armies, roads, and government to restrain chaos across much of the world. Some believe Paul avoided naming Rome directly because writing openly about Rome being removed could have been dangerous. And this view makes sense historically, but then I realize it has a problem. Rome fell long ago, and the final man of lawlessness did not appear in the complete way Paul describes. So Rome may explain part of the picture, but it probably does not solve the whole mystery. So the second possibility I was thinking of is the church itself, because the church carries the gospel into the world. The church prays, the church speaks truth, the church resists deception, the church reminds the world that Jesus is Lord. And where the church is faithful, darkness is confronted. Where believers live with courage, mercy, and holiness, evil does not move as freely. This view made sense to me, but the church does not restrain evil by its own power. The church only has power because God's Spirit works through it. So it's not the church. So that led me to the third possibility, God's Spirit. The Holy Spirit. I thought many Christians believe the restrainer is the Holy Spirit working in and through the church. Okay, that's a strong answer. The Holy Spirit convicts the world of sin. He strengthens believers. He preserves truth. He awakens conscience. He keeps the gospel moving through history. When people stop listening to the Spirit, conscience grows dull. Lies become normal. Sin becomes entertainment and pride becomes wisdom. And then evil stops hiding. So the Holy Spirit fits this passage very well, I thought. But there's still another possibility. What if the restrainer is an angelic power? You know, the Bible sometimes shows spiritual beings involved in earthly events. In Daniel, angels and dark powers are connected to kingdoms. In Revelation, angels hold back winds, release judgments, and stand at major turning points in history. So it's possible that Paul is referring to a heavenly being appointed by God to restrain the final evil until the appointed moment. And that made sense. But then I went to a deeper answer behind all the answers. Rome may restrain, the church may restrain, the Holy Spirit may restrain, an angel could also restrain. But none of them restrain apart from who? Right, the consistent power behind all of these ideologies that I've considered is God Himself. And for me, that is the solution. The ultimate restrainer is God's sovereign power working through whatever means He chooses. It could be all of them. Paul may have had a specific identity in mind when he taught the Thessalonians face to face. We cannot say with absolute certainty what that specific identity was. But we can say what Paul clearly wanted them to understand. God is still in control. The man of lawlessness cannot arrive early. The final rebellion cannot happen by accident. Evil cannot cross the line until God permits the line to be crossed. For me, that is the real answer to this mystery. The mystery is not fully solved by naming the instrument. The mystery is solved by recognizing the hand behind the instrument. God is the one who restrains. God is the one who governs time. God is the one who tells darkness, this far and no further. So, most of us judge God by what happens, right? We see pain, we see the door that closed, we see the prayer that seemed unanswered, we see the betrayal, the delay, the loss, the storm. But what about what never happened? What about the disaster God quietly prevented? What about the relationship He blocked because He knew where it would lead? What about the temptation that lost its grip before it destroyed your future? What about the wrong opportunity that disappeared because it would have taken you somewhere you were never meant to go? Boy, when I look back in my past, I know these things to be true. What about the danger that never touched your life because God restrained it before you ever saw it coming? And that's one of the greatest lessons hidden in this passage. God is always doing more than we can see. Sometimes His mercy looks like rescue. Sometimes His mercy looks like restraint. You know, a child may not understand why a parent says no. The child sees restriction. The parent sees danger. You see, the child thinks love would give them what they want every time. The parent knows love sometimes blocks what would destroy them. Maybe some of the closed doors you wanted to be open were actually not rejection, but protection. Maybe some of the delays you resented were actually mercy from God. Maybe some of the silence you misunderstood was God holding something back. And you know what? Paul does not end with the restrainer. He ends with Jesus. He says lawlessness will one day be revealed, but Jesus will destroy him with the breath of his mouth and the brightness of his coming. So the restrainer delays evil, but Jesus defeats evil. The restrainer holds back darkness for a season, but Jesus ends darkness forever. And that's why this mystery matters. I had so much fun going through it. We may not know every detail. We may not be able to name the restrainer with perfect certainty, but we know the lesson. Evil is real, but evil is limited. Darkness is active, but darkness is not sovereign. History is frightening, but history is not random. God is still ruling. God is still restraining. God is still protecting his people in a way that we may not always see. But he loves you. And one day, we may have the direct answer to this mystery. But until then, we will trust God. Not because we understand every mystery, but because Jesus stands above every mystery. And he still has the final word. My name is Douglas Vandergraph, and I believe in Jesus Christ. This was a fun conversation. I had so much fun going through it. I really appreciate you being with me today. God bless every single one of you. Every single one. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.